Hello and welcome back to Coast FC, the Canadian soccer podcast focused on all things CPL, Canadian Championship, and more. My name is Felipe Ojejo.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And today we are looking at some exciting Canadian Championship matches. I mean, what a week for
Incredible.
Canadian soccer. Some really high highs, some really low lows for a few teams. But just action and drama and chaos in all of the matches. You really could peel your eyes off of them. So fantastic for the neutrals. You were fans of some of the teams that lost. It's safe to say probably most of you are heartbroken. But before we dive into all of the drama that happened in this round of the Canadian Championship, remember to follow us on all of our socials at Coast to Coast SC, as well as on YouTube and Spotify, so you can see the visuals that we are creating for every episode. And as well, follow Canadian Soccer Daily so you can catch up on our clips if you can't make it through the whole episode. But let's start off with, I guess, the tamest game of the week, which is incredible to say, a 3-1 win for Forge in a 9:05 derby. Usually that would be a highlight of a match day, but that goes to show how crazy the Canadian Championship was this week, where this one was the tamest of all four of the matches. 3-1 was the final scoreline, goals by Jordan Hamilton getting 2 goals in the 8th and the 39th minute. Sandwiched between both of those goals was Chouanier getting a goal in the 17th minute, and York were able to get a little bit of something at the end through Josue Martinez's first goal for the club in the 87th minute. But this game was around the same time as the Ottawa Valour game, which, to spare Mike's misery for a little while, we will save for later. But let's just say that across both games, a lot of action in the first half, a lot of action in the first 40 minutes, actually, in both games, incredibly. But let's focus on the Forge game first. So, safe to say, Forge absolutely bulldozed York in the opening half an hour, 40 minutes. It was incredible to see from a certain point of view, because York lined up the same way in the same formation that they did against Vancouver. And I was hoping for a much improved result, especially given the fact that they were so emphatic against Vancouver. But it seems that... Forge has York's kryptonite this season, because that's twice now in quick succession that Forge have put 3 past York, and I think this game was a little bit more vicious from York than the last one. I think York mostly just sort of capitulated. If you look at all of the goals, it was just Forge destroying York in transition and really making them pay for their mistakes. Did you find, Mike, that this was a game where York were their own worst enemies?
Yeah, and it really wasn't a good time to have this kind of game, especially when I think Jordan Hamilton's come in with a bit of a point to prove. Terran Campbell's obviously started the year in CPL play. Jordan Hamilton's obviously fighting for that spot, and it's done himself no harm with some of his finishes. Should well have had a hat trick. That left foot shot, which he sort of didn't connect well with at all. That was a really good opportunity for him, and could have come away with 3 from this game, and it was just finding space in really dangerous areas really quite comfortably.
Yeah, it was a proper. It almost felt like a training drill of this is what not to do when you are defending a transition. It felt like York were having just no control over the match in the first half an hour, 45 minutes. They looked very chaotic. They looked disjointed, and on the other hand, Forge were just fluid. And the way that they attacked, I put the word awesome in it, and not just awesome like in the awesome, but like in the biblical sense of awesome. Like I was in awe seeing the way that they were attacking, because I mean the first goal, Jordan Hamilton, what a pass by Tristan Borges. I'll say it right now off the top, Tristan Borges is my player of the week. And he's honestly, for me, he's the front runner for the MVP because he is on a different level this
Yeah.
season. He is just balling out. I don't know what he has in the mornings. I don't know what he has with his Weetabix, but it is working for him this year because I've never seen this level of Tristan Borges. I honestly think, I watch closely 2019 Tristan Borges, and I think this new level of Tristan Borges is the best that I've ever seen. I truly think that he's at his peak right now, which is fantastic to see if you are a Forge fan. Probably not great to see if you are a York fan in
No,
this
yeah,
match,
it'd be
but
sick and
an
exciting.
absolutely sumptuous ball in for Jordan Hamilton. And then the second goal. Oh, actually, no, I want to talk about the first goal. I want to talk about the goalkeeping in this one, Mike, because
Yeah.
goalkeeper was caught in no man's land. Jordan Hamilton did very well to head the ball over, but I can't be the only one to think what was Vincenzini doing in that one.
Yeah, it's almost like he didn't realize where Jordan Hamilton was. Like, it was, yeah, all over the place. He lost track of where his goal was, where the striker was. It was just ball watching, I guess. And yeah, it was pretty quite inexcusable for a pretty experienced goalkeeper.
Exactly, and I think it really set the tone for York United, where that kind of epitomizes like they were just kind of all over the place. They it just felt like they weren't focused, they weren't locked in. They had a couple of lapses in decision making and judgment and understanding the space around them. That's why it felt so easy. Forwards were like a
Yeah,
hot knife through butter.
yeah.
That and the butter was York's defense in the opening 40 minutes.
We
And
got
then
the
Jordan Hamilton. Yeah.
well, I'm gonna say I like where you talking about their craziness and York's lack of composure. We got the first sending off of someone on the bench from York in the first half. The goalkeeping coach was sent off. Are we starting to uh, expect the sort of chaos of York from last year creeping back in, or are you expecting this to continue, or do you think Martin Nash might try and deal with it a bit better than last year?
Here's the thing. I want to say that they'll be better, but it's the same players under the same coach. And
Yeah,
I feel like this is not going to be the first time that we see a sending off for York United off the bench. Um, I was surprised there wasn't a player, but I
yeah,
remember, I think it was also last year, York United got a coach sent off. I don't know if it was the
yeah,
same bloke, but they also had a member of staff sent off. So it's, I think, to be a little bit expected. I know that's something
mm,
that we were talking about the disciplinary issues in York, and the fact that it runs deeper than just the players, but also the staff. I can understand that you get frustrated, and especially on the sidelines where you're a little bit helpless, it can probably
mm,
reach a boiling point quite quickly, but you gotta be able to keep your cool on the side of
yeah.
sidelines, because you can't be sent off as a coach, as a staff,
No.
because what kind of example does that set for the players and for the fans that are watching?
Especially as the goalkeeping coach, I could understand him screaming at his own goalkeeper for the first goal, but why he's having a go at the ref and things like that, I have no idea.
Exactly. But yeah, again, that kind of also set the tone for the rest of the match. But yeah, I mean the third goal with David Chouanier, or the second goal rather with David Chouanier, what an absolute
Mm,
passage of play. The little flick on from Benny Banga, Jordan Hamilton being clever, the pass to Borges, Borges just managing to slip it in behind, and then I always love a good bar down goal. It just makes it
yeah,
look like with that power, it just makes it look so much more emphatic,
yeah,
and
really tight
fantastic.
angle as
And
well.
yeah, really,
It's
like
quite
it's
wide.
not easy to score from there. You really
Mm,
have to go. Like if you're gonna go near post, you have to thump it hard and high. And
yeah,
that's exactly what he did. There was
yeah.
absolutely no chance for Vincenzini, but I mean, this attack is on, I put there on
Mm,
cloud nine. They are really
yeah,
on cloud nine because Betty Banga is just having fun, honestly, sometimes
yeah,
on the side, the way that he can get past players, the way that he can, create chances out of nothing. Tristan Borges, like I was singing his praises just before, is on the form of his life. David Chouanier has found a really, really great time to have this sort of renaissance for himself and getting these goals, and he plays really well. Maybe not as he's not as flary as Benny Bedebanka, or maybe he doesn't take as prominent a role as Borges, but he still has had a really, really good season so far in the entire attack. And now Jordan Hamilton has stepped in and said, I want to score some goals too, since the
Yeah.
strikers haven't really been pitching in. And he did exactly that with 2 goals. His third goal, I will say, I feel bad for Borges, because Borges was the one that started it off and almost, it ended it as well. It hit off the post and fell for J Ham, and he tapped it in, which is great for his confidence. But I think
Yeah.
Borges deserved a goal as well as his assist for, I guess you could still call it an assist off the post there for Jordan Hamilton. For his efforts. But yeah, just spectacular opening 40 minutes. And as soon as it hit halftime, I think it was just before halftime, where York had like one of their first major chances, like shots on goal and looks. And the fact that it took so long for them to get to that point really shows just how off the pace they were. And heading into halftime, like looking at the halftime score, there, three goals to the good. Did you think there's no way back for
Yeah.
York United?
No, Forge are just in the zone now. Like, there's no way, once they take the lead, you can't see anything changing. They control the game. They just manage the second half. Yeah, for York eventually get one back, but it was never in doubt.
Yeah, and I think when you're facing a Forge side that is as lethal and as clinical as they have been so far this season, I was looking at the stats. They had 4 shots on target this game, scored 3 of them. So very efficient in that. 75% conversion rate there. They had a 1.75 xG across their 3 goals. And that's a trend that's continuing at the beginning parts of the season, because they've scored 10 goals in all competitions so far, off of an xG of 5.73. So nearly doubling their expected goals. So they are on lethal form right now in front of the goal, and it's, again, incredible to watch. But when you're facing a side that has so much confidence, so much swagger in the way that they play, don't think you can really do much. But credit to York, because after halftime, when it looked like it was going to be a second blowout of the night, York actually managed to do what Valour could not, and sort of do a little bit of damage control. And they came out in a lot more structure. They came out more wary of the threat that Forge has. I think Forge also maybe took their foot off the pedal a little bit. They're like, okay, job done. Let's just see it out. Game management. Let's not exert too much energy when we know we've got the win. And the rest of the match, all the way up until the 87th minute, it was pretty tame compared to the opening 30 or 40 minutes. And then York had a little bit of a silver lining, in that the Mexican youngster that came in on loan, Jose Martinez, got his first goal for the club. Again, similar to Borges's goal, or not goal, Jaron Hamilton's second goal that should have been Borges's. This should have been Brian Wright's. He hit the post, or the woodwork, and Jose Martinez managed to leap and head it in behind. And I really like when a player, even though it was his first goal for the club, and you would think you'd want to celebrate it a little bit more, I guess, personally, or like with your teammates and stuff like that. He went and got the ball, did his little celebration by himself, but then ran straight back to the center spot to try to, save as much time as possible to maybe spark a comeback. I really like that.
Yeah. He's looked good as well, like the start of this year. I thought obviously I didn't know the player beforehand, but he's come in, and when he's been used, like especially those first few games, he uses the ball really well. Good technically. Could be a really useful player for York this year.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, there's some silver linings for York in this match. I do think it's a little bit of a case of they have to go back to the drawing board, because they've shown that they can play well, and they themselves can be clinical, but they still are making a little bit too many mistakes at the back. They're still starting
Yeah.
games a little bit slowly. They're not as put together at the start of matches as maybe they should be. And when you're coming up against sides like Forge, where you know they're going to, from the first whistle, be running at you with everything that they have, you need to be switched on. And they got punished for not being switched on.
Mm.
So a little bit of a wake up call in some regards for Martin Nash. Um, Forge, on the other hand, with this result, get a rematch with CF Montreal
Yeah.
once again, fourth time in their short history. Um, Unable so far in 4 times of asking to beat them. The closest that they had was when they had a penalty shootout in 2021. I was actually working that game. Fun little story here. And I got to go behind the net where all the Barton Street Battalion were just
Nice.
to watch the penalty shootouts. And it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking
Yeah.
when they lost. Hopefully, as a CPL supporter, Forge can go and do
Mm.
the improbable of beating an MLS side after getting so close and do it on the 4th time of asking. But yeah, great job from Forge overall. And I think this is going to really set the tone for them because this is now, like I mentioned, 10 goals in 4 matches.
Mm.
An incredible statistic there for them.
Yeah.
And do you see Forge being the one to beat now, like after this, not just in the CPL, but even in the Canadian Championship?
They're looking the best. Like they're by far the best side in CPL at the moment. They've started this year in full flow. Kalongo's got his mistakes out of him in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. A few little mistakes, but they're forgivable. As a young goalkeeper thrown into Chivas Guadalajara, like an insane thing for this guy to be thrown into. So such a young goalkeeper, but since those, he's just shown he's learned. He showed how mature, like as a goalkeeper, he is, and it's been fantastic. You've been raving about Para, been a fantastic
Mm.
signing. I think he'll add some more to what they can do against Montreal, who, if I remember rightly, are struggling for strikers at the moment with injuries. I'm not sure if Mason Forrest's
Yes.
back. So yeah, who knows? Like their forward players are in great form. Benny Baddy Banger's like Iman Saloof last year. It's just like just give him the ball and let him do whatever he wants because he's just having fun
Mm-hmm.
out there. It doesn't seem like it's not like he's part of like do this specific role. It's here you go, have it and see what you can conjure up. It's going to be great to see Owolabi Belewu. I think for a young centre back who started so strongly, if he can have a great game, that puts him on the radar for a lot of big clubs straight away because he started off fantastically. And I really think if he can get that chance, I don't know if they'll play Methuselah or not, but if he gets that chance, he can have a great opportunity to really start showing people like there's a lot of good coming out of Canada.
Yeah, exactly. The young players that they have, the way that they're stepping up, and just all across the board, the way that everyone has been performing. The biggest question for me now is consistency because, like I
Mm.
mentioned, they're outperforming their XG incredibly, but usually XG manages to balance itself out. So I'm curious to
Yeah,
see how Forge managed to do when maybe they're not as clinical at times, but still, if you create enough high quality chances, regardless of whether you're outperforming XG or not, unless you're really unlucky, you're still going to score some goals. So
yeah.
really curious to see how Forge continue in terms of their consistency. But now, Mike, unfortunately for you, it is time to move on to the second game. We could only delay it so far for you, Mike.
Yeah.
I know this. You were probably lying awake
It was
in
ugly.
bed thinking of this moment. We're gonna move on to the second game here. Atletico Ottawa against Valour FC. Pretty quiet match, I'd say. Not much happened in this one.
It's quite
Except
a Winnipeg. Everyone turned off.
yeah. Um, Atletico Ottawa managed to set a new Canadian Championship record by beating fellow CPL side Valour FC by 7 goals 2-0. Now, pardon me while I had to run through these goal tallies here, through the goal names.
I'll sit back and wait.
So Ali Bassett scored 2. First, he started it all off with a 14th
Yeah.
minute penalty, a little bit of a contentious penalty there, which we'll talk about in a bit. He then scored in the 65th minute. Alberto Zapater got his first 2 goals for the club. Could have had a hat trick in this
Should
match,
have.
which is incredible save from El Toro.
Mm.
Should have had a hat trick.
He couldn't
Incredibly,
believe it.
no, he could not believe it. I also love that the miss that he did was put as the save of the match because it was the only thing
Any goal he did.
Muresti Ranwa could do, yeah,
Yeah.
in that match. But he did score in the 30th and the 38th minutes, an 8th minute brace from him. Ruben Del Campo scored a minute after Zapater's first and the 31st before scoring 4 minutes after Oli Bassett's second in the 69th. Try to keep up here. And then we have Balou Tabla having the 63rd minute goal, the 6th goal in this tie, just to join in on the fun. But yeah, I was watching this game. I'll be honest, I was I had it sort of in the background. I was doing some other chores. I was cooking and things like that. But the amount of times that I had to just drop everything because my mouth was agape because I could not believe what I was looking at, especially in that opening 40 minutes, because wow. I'll leave it. I will give you the floor in a second so you can talk about Valour, but I just want to. I wrote down here: set piece defending, woeful; transitional defending, woeful; Valour in general, woeful, because that's what it was the first 40 minutes. The goals that they conceded, oh my days, it was incredible. And I think we should be fair, and start off with, hold on, this graphic here I think also embodies our expectations for Valour were low, but holy, there's an expletive there, so I put a guacamole, holy guacamole. Yeah, because goodness gracious, our expectations were low, but wow, were they exceeded there in the wrong way. But let's start with the first goal, the penalty, the clash of heads here between Samaka and Matteo De Brie. And unfortunately for Samaka, he had to be taken off because of it and was withdrawn on a substitution, on a concussion injury. So that meant that they had extra subs as well. Looking back on this one, did you think it was the right call from the referee to give the penalty on this one, or do you think it was a little bit harsh?
I thought it was a bit harsh because the ref was so clear as if, Samake is going to make a foul with his head. It did seem a bit harsh. I don't think it would have changed the game much, but
No.
but yeah, it did seem I may be missing something. Maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe there's something in the way that he goes in. Maybe it is just throwing his body in a dangerous way when maybe the ref sees it as if he's too slow. He knows it, but he's still going in. I'm not sure. I personally felt it was a bit harsh, but yeah. What about you?
I feel like it was 50-50 because Samake came in. Yeah, it was head to head, but also he came in with a little bit of shoulder, and it looked like he kind of shoulder charged him a bit. And because he got so much contact with the man, that I feel like, I could see that being given. So I wasn't too angry at the fact that it was given, but I did see a little bit of unrest between some people on that being given, especially the fact that both players came out quite worse for wear. Samake was the one that came out more worse for wear than the Brienne in the end. But then, Oli Bassett stepped up, dispatched his penalty. And as soon as that goal went in, I thought, okay, this is, unless Valour show similar, sightings, I guess, of what we saw in the match against Forge, I kind of thought, okay, now that Ottawa has got the early lead, I don't see them surrendering this unless they pull an Ottawa from last season and get the defensive. So I wasn't fully writing off Valour, but I kind of thought that is like, okay, the chances have drastically gone down. Did you anticipate this, though, as soon as that first goal went in, or did you think that they might have had a chance?
Yeah, no, I didn't anticipate 7 until maybe once the second goal went in and you started seeing how the game was going, then it was a bit, okay, this could get a bit ugly because this defense was atrocious. They were literally just running around like headless chickens. There was no, like, you've got a back three, you need to operate as a back three. This was just 3 people running around like they're in the playground chasing after the ball. And unfortunately, the goalkeeper really didn't have a good night at all. He's all over the place, coming out for crosses from the corner, getting lost in no man's land. For as it was Zapater's first one, or it was just atrocious. Like all around, the team just completely lost their heads. Some changes were obviously made from the last game of Forge. So yeah, there's players coming in for their first games of the season, things like that. So they're not up to speed, but how they can be. I mean, when you look back at these Canadian Championship weekends, if you didn't if you didn't follow the league at all, and you didn't follow Canadian football, and we said, right, a couple of these are amateur teams, who are you going to pick?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true. It was
And all
not a
this
good
after I
sight.
said how promising things were looking after Forge, and could we see a little like they just slapped me in the face for my optimism.
I remember at the end they were like, maybe we could take some positives. Maybe this is the beginning of a
Yeah.
turning of a new leaf for Valour. And nope, they convincingly demonstrated that this was not the beginning
Yeah.
of a new
Not dreaming.
era. Yeah, exactly. Of a new turning a new page for the club. It was yeah, like you mentioned, just oh my goodness, those goals off set pieces, especially the 2
Mm.
corners, was just they might as well have just taken photos of the Valour defenders and just put them on sticks because it was the exact same thing. There were
Yeah.
statues there.
Yeah, it's
It
play against
was
cones.
yeah, might as well have just been cones in that one or the little like free kick dummies because it was just absolutely woeful overall.
Mm.
And you know, you lose Samake and you already have some injury problems in the defense, and you bring on Juan Paulo Sanchez, and you think, okay, I'm, you know, you bring Campbell, I think, back into the defense, and you kind of
Mm.
have to shoehorn some players into positions. But even still, the fact that you have 4 goals conceded inside 40 minutes
Mm.
is inexcusable in my eyes, especially the way that you concede the goals, the
Yeah.
way that they allowed, you know, the fact that you concede right after your own kickoff. That one is such a pet peeve for me. It's like
Yeah.
if you kick off and you immediately lose the ball and then they attack in transition and you are not settled enough to defend it and they go and score 2 in 2 minutes in this sort of like
Mm.
misery compiler, you need to take a good hard look at yourself because what are you doing?
Yeah.
Genuinely. It was so tough to watch. And I was when I was cooking, my partner was there and they're like, "Is it a fifth? Is it a sixth? Is that a seventh?" They're like they could not believe and they don't even watch and I'm just there
Yeah.
just speechless
Mm.
because you would think going into halftime with Atletico Ottawa playing on fire. I mean, again, how much of it is them being really, really good, and how much of
Mm.
it is Valour being really, really bad? We don't
Yeah.
know. It's
Well,
tough to
it's some
discern.
of it is like when you've got Campbell and Haynes as 2 of your back 3, they're not centre backs. And like I don't know if Phil Dos Santos is just like, yeah, well, we'll just add a centre back, and then by proxy, we're a better defensive team because we've got 1 extra centre back. It doesn't work like that. Like these players now have to learn to play as a back 3, and you're throwing 2 people in who aren't centre backs into a back 3. And like Jordan Haynes is a fullback, so he moves up and down the pitch a lot more than the centre back usually will. So these lines that were forming, like that, Del Campo especially, and Tabla, they're just stepping past their man. Their man's thinking, oh well, they're definitely going to be offside, but someone else someone else has dropped really far deep, and they're like, it's just in like triangles for the back 3 when it should be a line, and it was just they made it really easy for them.
Yeah, I mean, but credit to Ottawa because you know they played Valour way off the park. And
Mm.
I think special mention to these two players in particular, Alberto Zapatero and Ruben Del Campo,
Mm.
because especially I think for Del Campo, he didn't score at all last season. We were saying that
No,
he
yeah.
was really lacking in terms of finishing, in terms of end
Mm.
product. He didn't really have shooting boots, and credit to him in this season. Again, Sam Salter, who also was struggling with some goals last season, was given the nod. A lot of people were expecting him to kick on. Hasn't really kicked on. So Ruben Del Campo has come in, and I think he's the clear starter now because of I think he has 3 goals in his last 2 games now, and
Mm.
the goals that he scored, again, I don't know if you would call them necessarily like wonder goals.
Yeah, we can
But you
finish
gotta,
it as well.
yeah, but you gotta be able to finish, finish your dinner. That's what you are as a striker, is you're supposed to be able to be a clinical finisher.
Mm.
So great for him to be able to start the season off strongly, and then Zapater to get his first 2 goals for the club, all both off set pieces. That shot that he should have had, a
Yeah.
hat trick, which would have been incredible, because I think that was also in the first half. Um, for
Oh,
for
no,
the
I think
hat
it
trick,
was
I
the
think that
second half.
was it a second half.
The yes, yeah.
Okay, so he could have had a
Yeah,
hat trick. I thought it was gonna be first half hat trick, but he still could have had a hat trick and should have had a hat trick. Which 38-year-old midfielder having a
yeah,
hat trick against you, that is another low
yeah,
for Valour. Not to discredit obviously Zapater, his fitness and his dedication and his ability, but still.
yeah. Well, he was my player of the week, um, purely because I watched this game, and sort of go behind the curtain. I was obviously this kicked off at midnight, and I thought I'll watch the 2 games the next day, and I wake up to a text from you saying, "Sweet Lord Valor," and I was like, "Oh God, what?" Like, oh, no. And I look in, and I was like, "Zapatero scored twice. Surely that's never happened before." And I went back over his games. He's never scored a hat trick, so that would have been his first ever career hat trick. But it's his first brace, and he's only scored 2 previously, both for Sporting Lisbon back in the 2010-2011 season. So it's been a long
Wow.
while. I mean, the 2010-11 season, he got 2 braces, and that was he scored in 3 games, got 5 goals, and then didn't score again until the 2017 season. So, I mean, he's not exactly prolific. It's not really his duty on the pitch so much, but yeah, I had to give him my player of the week for getting those 2 goals and sort of breaking the habit.
Yeah. And by the time it's 5, right? By the time it's 5-0, you would think, okay, you have, like, honestly, by the time it's 4-0, you would think damage control now. Second half,
Mm.
damage control. Try to throw on some more defensive players. I know you don't have many, but try to do something and really just see this one out. Don't concede any more goals. Try to keep it somewhat respectable. Maybe get one back in transition, make it a 4-1 match, something. But no, Phil Dos Santos' side comes out, and it's like the exact same as in the first half. I'm just absolutely flabbergasted, because I'm like, I think I mentioned this before in an earlier episode. I really like when managers stick to their guns and they like to live and die by their sword. But there are extremes. There are lines
Yeah.
that must be drawn. There are, like, all right,
Mm.
let's think about what this could do in the long term, because you're already
Mm.
0-3 in the season. You're already, on a really tough run because you're away from home all the way until June.
Yeah.
And now you're 4-0 down in the Canadian Championship, and you have very little pride left. Let's try to salvage that little bit you have left,
Mm.
and really just try to keep it at 4-0. But no, I mean, to be fair, it took them 20, 10, or 15, 20 minutes for Atletico Ottawa to get going. But then, yeah, goals in the 63rd and the 65th and the 69th. Another terrible 10-minute window there for Valour. And then so quickly it went from 4-0 to 7-0.
Mm.
And at that point, Mike, when you saw 7-0, what were your genuine thoughts? What was your genuine reaction? I'm so curious, because for me, it was just like, how can, maybe this is because I watch, I'm used to the Premier League and the top 5 leagues, but after
Mm,
you lose 7-0, how can a coach go out and face the media? Or how can a coach be able to walk out with his head held high? Because that was completely and utterly inexcusable in my eyes from Phil Dos
yeah.
Santos. So for you, what was your reaction?
Well, I'm quite used to these as a Southampton fan back here in England with our 9-0 defeats to when we had
Right. Yeah,
Ralph
right.
Hasenhüttl as manager. And the thing Hasenhüttl had in his favour was he was quite well liked, quite a
Mm.
nice person, like got a bit of personality about him. He aged very quickly while coaching Southampton, and you could see it. And he had a little bit of sort of good favor like around the fans, and that sort of helped to go out and say, yeah, that just wasn't good enough. And you had a little bit of a belief in him that sort of give him a kick up the arse and they'll play a lot better next week. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for Phil Dos Santos. He's not got any goodwill amongst the fans, it doesn't seem. They're incredibly frustrated. They're frustrated with the players. They're frustrated with the way the club's run. There's no way of coming out of this in any form of good light. And to have a decent performance just a few days prior and then think, okay, right, we still haven't won, but we've played a little bit better, and we can see things are starting. It was like partnerships are forming, things are starting to work. Maybe we'll start to get something, and then to do this straight after, it's if Valour have any thoughts towards the future, any thoughts at all towards this season, next season, the season after, I can't imagine Phil Dos Santos lasting particularly long now, and whether they have a new coach ready for the first home game of the season could be when this starts getting itself sorted.
I think that's for me is the biggest question is like, can they even afford to let go of Phil Dos Santos
Yeah.
right now? I feel like from their point of view, Phil Dos Santos is clearly someone that management likes, probably because I've heard rumblings that he doesn't really ask for much.
Mm.
And he's not somebody that, demands a certain standard, I guess, or demands a certain amount of backing and things like that. I think he has a really good relationship with the management group, which bodes well for him. But I think it also makes it that some fans see him as a little bit of spineless,
Yeah.
and so I think that he has credit in the bank with management. But yeah, after this and 4 straight losses, and I don't know where they're going to get points genuinely between here and their first home match, especially after a game like this. They do have to go back. They're staying in Ottawa because they're facing Ottawa again this
Mm.
weekend. And I think just the biggest thing for them is don't lose 7-0
Yeah,
again.
make it a
you
little bit
know?
better.
Yeah, it's just the bar is so low for them right
Mm.
now. It's ridiculous. And yeah, I just don't know where they go from here. Genuinely, I don't know where they go from here. I don't know where Phil Dos Santos goes, the club goes, the players go. So many bad performances. You know, again, there's some silver linings. Obviously, we've talked about Temi Atanoglu and Zachary
Mm.
Secunda,
Oh,
but like
Benate's
you,
header. That
oh
was
yeah,
one good spark. Antonoglu's cross comes in again, pinpoint. Really good header from Benate. But there was 5 seconds of the game for Valour fans to enjoy.
yeah, I think Benate, I don't know what it is with him, but I think he's allergic to goals right now because so many chances he's been able to have that he just fumbles wide. Uh, but yeah, Valor, I, I genuinely don't know what's gonna happen with them. It's gonna be. I hope it's not us like the occasion where you're slowly looking at a train crash. You're like in those seconds before in slow
Mm.
motion.
Yeah.
But I feel like this might be that in terms of Phil Dos Santos's tenure here at Valor. And I know that Valor fans, from what I've seen on social media and on Discord channels, they're already beyond hopelessness. They're at straight apathy, and it's so sad to
Yeah.
see from
Mm.
CPL fans in general, and a league so young like this. So hopefully they get some better days soon enough, starting
So,
uh, Yeah, hopefully for yourself as well. Starting against Ottawa this weekend. But for Ottawa, I mean, a statement win, I guess. This a statement win that they
Mm,
were hoping. I mean, 7-0 is as much as Valour could have been bad. You need to be ruthless to get 7 goals in a game
yeah.
like this, and that's exactly what they did. Do you think now, based off this statement win, they can really build off of it to mount a charge?
Yeah, I think if they don't just get sort of cozy and think, yeah, everything's fine, we don't need to try, this is easy. Like as long as they keep this mentality, they'll be perfectly fine. I mean, this is one in the eye to John Herdman as well, isn't it? Knocking up 7. So yeah,
You will be very
there's
jealous,
something
yes.
Toronto to keep their eyes out for in the future, future rounds coming forward. But yeah, I mean, they look like they're Valor's given them a hand, but they did look like they're sort of forming like a bit of like more cohesion, and things are starting to sort of fit into place in this game. And a match like this is just going to set them up better for the future. They're going to feel even more confident going into games, and maybe it takes a little bit of the pressure off them and a bit more confidence. That so when they come up against better opposition like your Forges, Cavalries, like this could be they could be in a much better place.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that for them, this will spur them on to really challenge not only in the league, obviously, but also in the Canadian Championship,
Mm.
as they now have moved on to the quarterfinals, and they will be facing Pacific FC, who
Mm.
are going or were part of the third match of this weekend here, as they faced or this weekday games as they faced TSS Rovers.
Confusing.
No, I know there's so many games, weekdays, weekends. We barely have time to do these recaps before other games are starting.
Yeah, there's another game
Fantastic.
coming.
And there's already another game coming exactly at the time of recording, so it's great for content. But oh
Yeah.
my lord, there's just so many games. But yeah, Pacific FC facing TSS Rovers on the island. Another opportunity for the Rovers to get a cup set after defeating Valor last season, and they were so close to
Mm.
doing it again. It was 1-1 in the end between the two sides. Michael Hennessy, the Simon Fraser University product, scored in the 76th minute, somebody that a lot of people here in BC rate very highly, and see him being able to kick on and have a really good career. But then Rion Moore equalized in the 97th and a half minute to bring Pacific level right at the death, 1-1. A little bit contentious, that goal, because of the added time, but we'll get to that in a little bit. It was a match that I think, for the way the Rovers wanted to draw it up, it was exactly how they would have wanted it to go.
Mm.
Because for 75 minutes, they were just so solid defensively, especially in that first
Mm.
half. They really kept Pacific at bay. They only had a handful of chances in that first half, and they were just so well structured. And that's what you expected of Rovers if they wanted anything for the match. It wasn't going to be like how it was against Valor, where I think
Mm.
they had a little bit more joy. They were in front of their own fans and against a
Yeah.
weaker side. It was a game where they needed to not make any mistakes, because that allows Pacific to punish. Thankfully for them, Pacific still sort of not finding that perfect connection
Mm.
in the attack to be able to punish. But on the first 45, do you think going into the break level was a fair shout on how the game was going?
Yeah, definitely. I think last year, obviously, TSS Rovers got through and faced Pacific and got Pacific when they were in full flow. Whereas this year, Pacific is starting a bit slower, defensively really good, but obviously made a lot of changes in this one. But their attack isn't clicking. It's still not. So TSS Rovers did really well just to sort of frustrate them a bit further. And when your strikers and your attacking players aren't playing with full confidence, just by frustrating them a bit longer, it was just really good work from the Rovers, and definitely 0-0 at the half was a really fair, that was really fair result to get at the midway point.
Yeah. And I think, starting in the second half, you could tell that Pacific needed to come back stronger. And they did exactly that, because in the first 3 minutes, they hit the post twice in a
Yeah.
flurry of chances. And genuinely, they should have gotten at least a goal from that, starting the second half strongly, because they caught Rovers out, which is something they weren't really able to do
Mm.
in the first half at all. And again, goes to show the attack a little bit elusive in terms of consistency and being
Yeah.
able to put away the chances that are being presented to them. I think that Rion Moore scored, obviously, the winner at the end, but in the 90th minute, missed an absolutely glorious chance. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's sort of how he's been so far, where he's a bit hit or miss,
Mm.
which is what they did not want, because that's what they had last season with players like Gennaro Daniels and with Issa Ngaro.
Mm.
And now they've got another player like that with Rion Moore.
Yeah.
Uh, it's another player that I think a lot of fans were hoping would hit the ground running and be consistent.
Yeah.
But
So we'll
yeah,
see
it
what
just
this
wasn't.
goal does for him. Like, getting that first one might give a little more confidence going into the next games, maybe, and take sort of that weight off the shoulders of just getting that first one. For strikers coming into leagues, it's just vitally important you get that first goal, and then you can crack on. Like, the longer it takes, the worse it is.
No, yeah, exactly. I think for his confidence, that'll do wonders. And hopefully, it can be a little bit more consistent up front for Pacific, because that's really their missing link. If they can find a bit
Yeah.
more consistency up in the attack and have Rian Moore and Dario Zanata firing on a more regular basis, then they can be a very serious side because of how strong their defense was. But in the 76th minute, the defense was broken after a pretty cheap giveaway, loss of possession up high in their own pitch. It was really
TMG of
well
all people.
taken. Yeah, TMG, of all
Oh,
people, the player that's been one of the
mm,
most consistent players at the back,
yeah.
had a momentary lapse of judgment there. Really well taken from Rovers, because they only had
Mm,
one shot on target in the entire match,
yeah.
and it was this one. I think it was O'Day that slid Michael Hennessy through, and Michael Hennessy managed to put it away, even though he was under heavy pressure. A young lad like that, to be able to keep his composure and be able to
Mm,
actually capitalize on that one chance. That was the biggest thing going into it, is you have to be solid defensively, and you have to be clinical in the few chances you get. Those
mm.
were the two keys of success for Rovers, and they did exactly that. And the celebrations afterward were
Khaleesi dragging him with
incredible.
Khaleesi.
Yeah, Polisi having
With a
Hennessy in a
headlock.
headlock and then dragging him down. It looked like straight out of WWE, and then pinning him on the
Yeah.
ground. All was whistling was the referee for the 3 count. But it was a fantastic moment for Rovers fans and for League One fans all around. The people that have been clamoring on for ages that a lot of the players in League One, not just League One BC, but all across the country. I mean, we'll talk about League One Quebec in a little bit
Yeah.
as well. That there are a lot of gems there, local, Canadian, born and bred in the country players that are hungry for opportunities, and
Mm,
it's on the CPL to be able to give them more opportunities. And we should be looking a little bit closer to home rather than abroad, to in the way that teams are making up their squad, so we can really showcase and develop Canadian talent. I think this was another moment that really showcased that, as well as the moment that we'll talk about in the next game. But this goal went in, and then Rovers went full defensive, and Pacific started becoming desperate. They started throwing everything forward, everything into trying to get that equalizer. Like we mentioned, Rian Moore had a glorious opportunity
mm.
in the 90th minute. But as it went into added time, did you think that the Rovers were doing it again? They managed to get that upset once again? Or did you think
Yeah.
that Pacific had one less thing up their sleeve?
No, I did just because of no real full confidence in the Pacific attack at the moment. I mean, got to give praise to James Merriman again, like last week, making the big changes, the 3 changes at halftime, and rejuvenating the team, like in his halftime team talk. did it verbally in this one rather than ringing the changes, and they come out differently. But still, it's just there isn't a cutting edge, and I think you can see it in the players that they're getting frustrated and they're not quite as confident as they probably should be for their ability levels that they're going to convert. I mean, Tucovianu, first start for the club of Romania, and then hitting the post a couple of times before that. He just looked so like bemused, obviously, like kind of when it just ricochets off, and when Ryan Moore misses that chance as well, you just think, this is one of those games where you're just like, you can have 100 shots and none of them are going in.
Exactly, and that's what I thought as well. I was a little surprised with the added time, and a lot of people were a little surprised about the added time given by Alan Rook at the end. Some people thinking that it was a little bit unfair, but there were a couple of stoppages in the second half.
Exactly.
The fact that the goal came in the 97.5 minute out of, I think it was 6 minutes of added time, also will probably sting, as Rovers were literally a hair. If they would have cleared that ball, it would have been over. It was literally the last kick, the last play of the game, which makes it so much more heartbreaking for the Rovers. But, this is what happens. These are the moments that define teams and players and eras. And it was the one that Pacific were able to capitalize on, and they just about got away with it. And then right afterwards, the referee called for full time, and it went to penalties. And penalties that quite a few players missed. I believe it was 5 misses in total, because it went until the 7th round. Eamon Saluf missed, Kyle Jones missed of TSS Rovers, TMG missed, Devin O'Hay, it was O'Hay, not O'Day, who assisted Michael Hennessy, who also missed. And then all the way until the 7th round, where unfortunately the former Vancouver FC and a Colombian brethren of mine, Ivan Mejia, missed, and Josh Hurd, of all players, I know Michael McCall will be very annoyed with that, got the winning goal in the penalty shootout to unfortunately eliminate TSS Rovers. But they can go away from this match with their heads held high. And were you impressed overall with what Rovers were able to do in this match against Pacific?
Really impressed. Like, when you if you look at it just like from the bare bones, like TSS Rovers aren't a professional team, semi-pro team. Obviously, they've got a lot of good funding from around the community and in Vancouver. But they defended look how organized they were as a team, and look how badly organized Valour were. It's just, there's night and day. So you've just got to give them so much credit for like the work that these guys put in as a group, the management, the coaching staff, like to get them set for this. I mean, the seasons aren't long. These players coming and going, so it's real credit to the job they've done, that they were so well organized and took their chance when they got it.
Yeah, exactly. It was a really heartwarming moment, especially for myself as someone who has been able to watch the Rovers more closely. And I work closely with Michael McCall, who works closely with the Rovers, so I get a bit of a more internal look. And you can see that club is run with pure passion, with pure love for the sport. And really, it's about developing players so they can go on and play in the CPL or in the MLS or in the USL or Next Pro or abroad. And it's really about heightening the level of talent that there is in British Columbia and in Canadian soccer. So I was so happy for them in terms of the performance. They left it all on the pitch, and they once again showed that the gap between the CPL and League One isn't as vast as maybe some people might have thought, especially when we get to the 4th game that we'll move on to now, which was Halifax Wanderers against CS Saint-Laurent. And when we were talking about teams going through some really low lows, it wasn't just Valour, because Halifax against Saint-Laurent, 2-2 the final score on that one. Halifax losing on penalties 5-3. I'll go through the goals on this one. Dan Nimick scored the first on a penalty, maybe a little bit of a contentious penalty, followed by a definitely contentious penalty for Saint Laurent, where Mamadou Kane put away, the former Vancouver FC
Yeah.
striker slash center back slash midfielder. I don't know about Ashton. I
Chuck him
love to
anywhere.
play that man. Chucking absolutely anywhere. And then Loic Quemi, I think it was, a player that played, I believe, for a futsal Canadian national team, scored in the 65th minute off a looping deflected shot before Ryan Telfer, another bit of a contentious goal here, scored in the 83rd because of potential offside. So a lot of talking points in this one. We'll try to run through it quickly so it's not too long of an episode. So let's start with the two penalties, because the first one, Jeremy Gagnon-Laparé drives into the box. I forget who the defender was for Saint Laurent, but puts his arm around his shoulder, gives him a little tug. I think he does go down quite easily, but when you put your arm around a player like that and pull, you're always going to give the referee a reason to point to the spots, and not really surprising that it was given. Dynamic steps up and puts it away. Then immediately following, in the 32nd or 31st minute, I think it was, where the penalty was given, it looked like Jan Fillion got out and got the ball in time before catching the player. But according to the referee, adjudicated that, according to
He's still
the
shaking his head
referee,
as the penalty was taken.
yeah, no, he was fuming the entire match, Jan Fillion.
Yeah.
He was not having it whatsoever. And the referee adjudicated as a foul, and so Mamadou Kane stepped up in the 32nd minute and dispatched it 1-1. Up until this point, Mike, what were your thoughts on the penalty calls? And I mean, Halifax didn't seem all that convincing in this match. We mentioned that this might be a bit of an easier match, a bit of an opportunity for them to pick themselves up after the disappointment of the first 3 weeks, but it didn't really look, it looked much of the same that we've seen in this season. The midfield looked disjointed, the attack, again, toothless. Ryan Telfer was their striker. Why is he playing striker when you have two number 9s available to you? I don't know if Thiago Coimbra, if he has an injury or something, or if he's still getting back up to form. But it just felt completely lackluster from Halifax, even after their goal went in off the penalty. What were your thoughts on the opening half?
Yeah, it just seems like Halifax are trying to overcomplicate things still. Well, like Probo's come in, and I know Patrice Geiser was really excited to get him and to bring him to the club. I don't think he's fit. He's worked his way into this team yet. I don't think he's I don't think he still needs time to get going. And these players last year, I know I keep harking back to it, but you got players last year who were just absolutely on fire, who aren't, like Massimo Ferrin's not getting starts, and Thiago Coimbra, like you mentioned. I mean, something has to be up, because he's not getting much time whatsoever. Ryan Telfer's not a centre forward; he's a winger or like an attacking midfielder. And it's just too much seems like overthought and trying desperately to do something new. But why try and fix what isn't broke?
Yeah, I think a lot of Halifax fans are thinking that exact same thing. After that match, I was in again the Discord channels and social media groups and stuff like that, and a lot of people were saying the same thing. Why change something that wasn't broke? Why drastically, overcomplicate things? And now we're looking more confused in this second year than we were at the beginning of the project in year one. So definitely confusing and troubling times for Halifax. They did get a little better when they brought Christian Valesky on, when they added Massimo Ferrin, I thought. But, I think Saint Laurent's second goal, a little bit lucky, yes. I think it was a little bit lucky. But I also think that, Jan Fillion was saying that there's a player in front of him and he was offside. Don't really know about that one. But I also think it's like Halifax didn't really deserve much more.
No.
And,
Yeah.
it was incredible to see
Mm.
the reaction from Halifax fans and coaching staff after that one, because, it's one thing to lead and then lose the lead and you're on level terms of nothing, to now be behind. And I feel
Yeah.
like that was a little bit of a wake up call for them, because they started to play better afterwards, and they got their sort of reward for improved play when Ryan Telfer got his goal. Though again, contentious in this one in the 83rd minute, because it was off a corner, and then it looked like Telfer getting the ball back across net, headed it into towards the goal, and it looked like Valesky got a little touch on it. And I'm pretty sure Valesky was on an offside
Mm.
position. He
Okay.
claims he didn't.
Yeah.
He claims that he did not, and he pointed straight to Telfer, and the referee seemed like he agreed with him, seemed convinced that it was Ryan Telfer's goal, but I'm not so sure. I'm not 100% convinced. But in the end, they got that goal, and
Yeah.
it felt like it was two very even sides in terms of
Yeah.
determination, in terms of work rate. I mean, CS
Well,
Saint
maybe not.
Laurent,
I don't know if you like. I think even in quality, but that's because I think Saint Laurent were like. I mean, Dan Nimick's interview after the post game is he said like, we know we're better players, but they wanted it more, and they
yeah,
went out and got it.
yeah,
And they
no, and that
that's
I think the biggest difference was that what CS Saint Laurent might have lacked in individual quality
mm,
and maybe superiority in some regards, they made up for with leaps and bounds in determination.
yeah,
And they were so aggressive, they were so direct. When they got the chance to move forward, they did so in numbers with force.
mm,
And it made it seem much more even than it should have.
yeah,
Halifax, let's be honest, with the quality that they have and the way they were playing last season, as good as Saint Laurent on, and I
yeah,
think this game goes to show that again, a League One side can tussle with a CPL side and can really give them a run for their money. And some of these players, a lot of these players, from the Rovers to CN Saint Laurent to a few other League One teams, some of those players should be playing at CPL level. And
yeah,
if you give them the opportunity to play at CPL level, you never know what superstar you're going to unearth. And that's the whole idea of the CPL, is
yeah,
giving players that
exactly.
have fallen through the cracks, at the MLS academies, giving those players that have fallen through the cracks the opportunity to shine and to kickstart the career or restart the career. And again, this game goes to show that you can't really discount
Mm,
any team in the Canadian Championship, except maybe Valour, when they're up against anyone, because it's the quality is a lot closer than you think.
mm,
Um, but yeah, by the end of it, I thought when it went to penalties, this was genuinely anyone's game. I did not feel like Halifax really had. They had some moments where they were in the ascendancy, but it was not enough for me to think, oh, they deserve to win this.
mm,
So as much as I love Patrice Geyser and the things that he's doing with
yeah,
Halifax and his style of play and this revolution that he's brought with Halifax, I was not surprised, or I was not disappointed when it went to penalties and when Saint Laurent won it off a
yeah,
Christian Valesky miss.
yeah,
Really, really, like you could tell he was going to miss. You saw the way that he walked up. He rearranged his ball 3 times.
yeah,
If he was a cartoon, he would have been shivering. Like, he would have been very
yeah,
easy to tell. He was fluttering like a leaf there, and so no surprise that he didn't
mm,
score his pen. And then, yeah, as soon as Saint Laurent scored the winning penalty, we got the photo right there. Patrice Geyser, head in his hands,
mm,
so disappointed, so despondent he was that he actually didn't show up for the post-match press conference. He sent his
mm,
assistant, which was
mm,
crazy. That's something that's very unheard of at this level. I think it's more common in Europe, and it was a lot more
yeah,
common back in the day. But to send your assistant because you don't want to face the media after a
mm,
frankly embarrassing loss, I think also left a sour taste in a lot of people's
yeah,
mouths with Patrice Geyser, because I mean, win or lose, you kind of have to face it, especially when you are the face of the team. You got to show up and you got to
Mm.
be like, listen, we were second best and we weren't good enough. All credit to the other team. They deserve it. We will go again. Even something as simple
Mm.
as that from the
Yeah.
coach. That's what you want to hear. Were you a little were you a little surprised, disappointed when you heard that Patrice Geyser wasn't at the post-match press conference?
Yeah, I am. I mean, I'm very surprised. I mean, trying to reflect on it and trying to imagine the situation. Like, he's an incredibly passionate man. Like, he was worried about what he might say. Um, so, but yeah, there's two big things from this result. And I go back to when Patrice Geyser was hired at Halifax, and he was constantly getting all these questions about your team of like um, previously constantly scoring goals, like breaking records for the number of goals scored. Do you think you're going to bring this into like, can you bring the way that Vaughan has already played into CPL? And he said, this is the only way I know how to cope. This is my philosophy of football. This is the only way I know what to do. Like, so I will do it. And it was brilliant. And all of a sudden he's gone back on that. And they're trying new things, a bit more of a defensive style. And it, like, he's declared just a year ago that's not what he's ever done. So trying to do all this does seem really bizarre. And I put on Twitter before we started a little poll: which fan base should be more upset about their Canadian championship result, Valour or HFX? And they've not had too many people come back, but already HFX is who everyone's vote for. I mean, Valour lose 7-0 to a record result, and people think that Halifax fans should be the most upset because it's their expectations were so much higher than this at the beginning of the season, and it's really quite concerning how they've started off the year.
Yeah, and it's just like similar to Valor. How do you turn it around at this point? Because
Mm,
it's not as easy as scrapping everything and saying we're going back to 4-2-3-1 and we're playing how we did last season.
mm.
Because you dedicate your whole preseason to this new
Yeah.
system, to this new philosophy. That's what you've basically trained your players to do in these last 6-7 weeks. And even at the end, the assistants mentioned that they still believe in it. They still believe in the philosophy. They still believe in the system.
Mm.
They're not scrapping it. That's clear. So how do you turn this
Mm.
around? Because if you're not going back to how you were playing before and this isn't working, what do you do, especially with so much pressure on you with how good you were? Like, you don't want to fall into the stereotypical second season slump here, but it's
Mm.
looking like that so far. So if you were a Halifax fan, or just from your point of view, how do you think they're able to turn this around?
They just, if they're going to continue in this shape, they've really just got to add a little bit more pace to the attack, and they need to bring in back in some of these players who have a lot of hunger. Like, they will go out and they will work they will work their asses off for Patrice guys. He had those players last year, and some of these new players coming in, not that I don't think they're good players, but I don't think they have the same mindset as the players did last year. And I think a lot of what Halifax, Patrice Geyser and his team require is those players to go out and, like, when you get on the pitch, you give it your all, like, and you chase and you hurry and you're animals out there, like you make it difficult for the other team. Whereas I think some of these players coming in are trying to be more technical, they're trying to be more of like a defensive and more of a structured system going forward, and I just don't. It just isn't quite the same. Well, it's not quite the same, but it's not. It just doesn't have the effectiveness at all of what last year had, and it's not as simple as going, well, okay, Ferrin's quick, chuck him in. Thiago Coimbra will just run himself into the ground for an hour, like, chuck him in. I understand he's brought in these new players, but he needs to get something different out of them, and he needs to wake them up and say, like, I understand where your careers have taken you so far, but your careers have brought you here, and this is what we need.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they recover from this on the weekend, and if we see any wholesale changes from the squad or from the tactical side, or if he's just going to keep trying until it works. Well, I know
Yeah,
that he
maybe.
said to give them some time, but I feel like can only be afforded so much time with the results that you're given, and I feel like you earn the time you're given based on the results and the performances that you have more than the results. And yeah, this does not look good for Patrice and for his team ahead of this one. But great news for CS Saint-Laurent, because now they will be facing Toronto FC in a
Fantastic.
massive match, probably the biggest match in their history. They'll be hosting it at Complexe Sportif Claude Robiat in Quebec, 9,000 capacity stadium. I'm sure it's going to be packed. I don't know if you saw the video of like the academy side, the youth players of CS Saint Laurent, the celebrations they had when they won. Clearly, it means so much. It means so much to Quebec, who have been crying out, dying out for a CPL side. Hopefully, this only goes to show that they more than deserve it. And when Quebec finally does get a CPL side, we're going to see a wealth of talent come into the CPL from that province. But yeah, really great stuff for CS Saint Laurent. I'm so happy for them. So happy for what that means for the League One Canada in general and standard that they have. And it goes to show that maybe we should have a few more League One sides in the Canadian Championship, because it's clearly not, they get battered every game. They can give a lot of teams a lot of teams that run for their money there.
Really, and you've got to give. We focused a bit more on Halifax, as we cover the CPL much more, obviously. But you've got to give so much credit to these coaches outside of the CPA and League One. Like, this is why Patrice Geyser was got his chance in the CPL. And you can look around League One now, and you're starting to see that there's a lot of good coaches out there, and the training and development for coaches across the country is really, really stepping up, and it's going to be great for the sort of future of Canadian soccer.
Yeah, genuinely, and I'm very excited to see how the league continues to develop and be able to include more and more of the teams that can showcase these kinds of talents, and maybe they'll be able to inherit some teams, maybe like a Saint Laurent, and get some of these players into the CPL straight away, and we can see what they do on a weekly basis, week in and week out in the league. But that is it for our Canadian Championship round. Unfortunately, no preview for this weekend's match. There was just too much to discuss, too much to talk about. It's already a long enough episode.
Reading out that list of Ottawa goal scorers took up too much time.
That took half the time, honestly, just reading out the goals from that match. But thank you so much once again for listening to this week's episode. Make sure to follow us on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC, so you can give us your thoughts on this episode and all of our episodes. What did you think about the matches? What did you think about our analysis? Are you happy, or are you a Valour FC and Halifax fan? Let us know, and if you have a comment or question that we enjoy, then we might get a shout out on the next show.
And if you do know a Valour fan, please give them a quick welfare check.
Keep them in your thoughts and prayers for this weekend, for the remaining time that they're on the road, because they'll definitely need it. But until next time, my name is Felipe Vallejo.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And this has been Coast to Coast FC, signing out.